Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Liverpool, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Somebody call Andre Arshavin because we need goals at Anfield. This is the Arsenal Vision pre-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. And we are live. We are talking to you about the game at Anfield tomorrow, Saturday. And it's a big game early in the season, always a cause for celebration. And nerves did not go great last season. I don't think I need to remind anybody that this was a 5-1 hammering, but I just did, and I am sorry. I am joined by Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
And Paul, you can find him on Twitter at Paz in My Pants. Hello, Paz.
Woohoo.
Woohoo, indeed, as effusive as ever. So, some quick housekeeping. If you missed it, we obviously did a podcast earlier this week, a post-match podcast. We did a couple of Patreon pods. We did Danny Ceballos match spotlight for his game against Burnley. We did an FPL pod because the Patreon thingy that we do has an FPL league, so we're doing that, keeping it kind of separate, but it's there if you want it. There's some amazing data and stats in the Discord chat too, and I hope if you want to give that a try that you'll come say hi because we'd love to have you there. But either way, if not, we got lots of good stuff for free like this and the regular pods, and we'll have a post-match pod and all that. But let's dive in. And before we talk Liverpool, Clive, we didn't get a chance to talk on it on the last pod, and we didn't get a chance to address it really anywhere yet, so I think we should just sort of quickly address Josh Kroenke sitting down with David Ornstein, talking a little bit about his vision for the club, his participation. It's a new era at Arsenal, certainly, with Josh Kroenke seeming to take the reins from Stan, and certainly from a PR standpoint, become the figurehead of the club. How do you feel about what was said in that interview and the transition to Josh and what it might mean for the future of the club?
Yeah, I suppose I listened to David Ornstein today on Andrew's podcast on Last Blog. I thought it was a fantastic chat, and I suppose he had me at single ownership. Really, that is the key step. I think it's something that I always hoped for. Just a whole scenario of having two owners battling out for supremacy. It will look back maybe in many years' time and realise that was the pure stagnation of the club, where we were literally just repainting the windows rather than changing and putting an extension on. Right, and that was really a period of where we had hope. We had these two very rich men in the background, but really we were stale, and we just allowed our manager to really run the club as a single entity. Ivan Gazidis eventually was tasked with removing the manager, in my opinion, and which he did, but he didn't have the gumption to take the club forward, and he went away. And then we've got a new structure in place, and something I've always hoped to see. You've heard me say it a million times, Elliot. Layers of people, not having single points of failure, roles and responsibilities, a proper organisation. And so for me, for a while now, this has been moving in the right direction, and the coach was always just something of the last piece, but not the major piece. And I feel we've been made to look at the club through the eyes of the manager, and I think we need to change how we supported the club, and I think the Kroenkes need to change and how they supported the club. And it's evident that's happened by hiring good people. Well, we can say good now, post the summer transfer break. Hiring good people, giving them responsibilities, giving them a structure by which to work in. And we're starting to see the change in the club. We're starting to see the people that actually own the asset, nurture the asset, and potentially even invest in the asset. I had a conversation with Tim Payton a long time ago, and I sort of said to him, if the Kroenkes get hold of this club, I wonder if the self-sustainable model will go. And I not just Tim, I got slammed by loads of people saying, no, we'll never change. But I think we potentially could change. I really do think that why wouldn't you want to invest in something that you own? Why wouldn't you want to add more infrastructure, or maybe pay for the infrastructure that we have outstanding debts on, to allow more flexibility to put towards assets on the football pitch? There are ways to invest in it. I know you know that too. There are ways to invest. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do going forward. But I was always fairly positive. I wanted to give them a chance. I was never going to shut down on the club and shut down on the people that had that single ownership. And now I'm sure everyone's feeling the same. when you have an organisation that looks like it's functional, it just feels different. And we all can see it, we all can feel it, and we're thinking, okay, this is interesting because we're moving with pace, we're not being hesitant, we're making decisions, and we're acting like a place where it's hard to be at rather than a place where you come to get your pension. And I love that. And I still think there's work to do. As we all know, there's work to do. And we'll probably get into some of that work as we go through the Liverpool preview. But I, for one, am very excited and so much looking forward to developing a new club, which for the last 22 years has just not... Sorry, I shouldn't say that. For the last 8 or 9 years has really, maybe since 2009, has really been stagnating. And now we're starting to see us move away from that drift.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it is fair to be optimistic and think that there are signs that things could be improving without having to go all the way to saying everything is great and now we are a perfectly run club. And I think we too often try to fall back on those binaries, things are great or things are shit, when there can be gradients. And for me, what's happening with Josh and the way he's speaking and the moves the club have made and the actions they've taken and the combination of all of those things indicate to me that on the scale of being a well-run club, we are moving in the right direction. Are we there yet? I think it would be silly to say we are, because as I have always said, one summer does not make a club, just like one swallow does not make a blowjob. But I think it is very clear that Josh understands that the fans want to hear from ownership, and doing that can only be a good thing. If you have a 4-year-old like I do, and your 4-year-old misbehaves, sure, you could say the 4-year-old is misbehaving. But what are people going to say when they see a poorly behaved 4-year-old? They're going to say, oh, they must have terrible parents, right? And I think part of the reason that ownership has gotten so heavily criticized is that the club has behaved poorly, and the presumption is that the ownership is not doing the right things. So when Arsene was sort of in decline and stuck around maybe a bit too long, and Gazidis was allowed to continue earning a bonus despite not performing at the level he should have. And then, Arsene goes and Gazidis goes and Sven comes and Sven goes, and we bring in Dennis Suarez in January and everything looks like shit. And we're sliding down the table and we're in Europa League. Of course, fingers are going to be pointed at ownership. But you also sort of have to look and say, what was ownership doing wrong? Were they not spending? Well, they did buy Lacazette and they did buy Aubameyang, and they have sanctioned some big sales all along the way. The problems have been losing players like Ramsey on a free, commercial deals that weren't necessarily competitive, executives that maybe were in over their head, a lot of decisions that just weren't taken by ownership. So if Josh is more focused on the club, if he's more aware of what needs to be done, if he's more connected to what's happening at the club, then maybe we won't see those kinds of mistakes repeated. And that's just something that's going to take time to determine. But I think, Paul, one of the things that I do like about this is that, when you are owned by an ownership group that has lots of sports investments, because that's really what they are, it is very easy to feel like you are part of a portfolio. And no one wants to think that their club is just a part of a portfolio. And one of the things that happens when Josh is willing to sit down and explain his vision and talk in a way that evinces at least some level of consideration and some level of involvement is that you... And it could be illusory, but you certainly feel that there is a focus on the club and its performance rather than it just being a bundle of assets in a portfolio. So for you, how valuable is the PR? Is him connecting with the media and reaching out to the fans? Is it purely illusory, or does it have a value in and of itself?
Both sides of the coin have a value. Obviously, the messaging is important because before that, there was almost a signal that they didn't really care about the messaging. You would get a corporate speak and limited response. In fact, a non-response. They would talk in their own good time. But I think there's a world of difference. I've always, I think when we've had these conversations, voiced some hope that Josh would make a difference. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Expecting a 72-year-old American with no background in soccer to be responsive to the Premier League and to be willing to take risks. You're not going to take risks if you're Stan Kroenke and if you have no feel for the business. And he operated, he came in and whenever it was, he started to get involved in Arsenal affairs, 2007 or 8 or whatever, and he was part of the board. as things move forward, and then he took the ownership position. He was obviously much more comfortable dealing with Arsene and dealing with Gazidis, who would give him his executive speak, and kind of keeping it at arm's length and working at that level. You then see Josh talking about how things have changed because when Arsene was around, and I'm not in the knocking Arsene business, but I think it's instructive that he said when Arsene was in business, Josh or whoever would have a meeting with one man, Arsene. And now there are various people, you can imagine Raul, Vinay, Edu, etc., that when you're having a meeting about the footballing or the business side of the business, you've got a team of people you work with. Now, Josh spent several months at the Emirates, probably the best part of 2 years ago now, trying to resolve how we move forward strategically. So, and he's in his 40s. He enjoys multiple sports, including soccer. He just has a much more feel for the business. Now, if you're going to take risks like we've just done this summer, like basically they have said, hey, that cash pile we've been sitting on for years, let's actually use some of that. If you're going to use it, if you're going to take risks, if you're going to lean out in front, you need to have a feel for the business so that you understand the risks you're taking. And that to me is what really changed. You can read all sorts of things in what Josh said, but the basic part of it is we didn't get into the Champions League at the end of last season. We reacted. We wanted to make risks, to make moves, to dip into the cash and do some brave things. And right from the get-go, after his discussion during the summer, after the "We Care, Do You" messaging, where he responded the next day in the US, it was very clear we were already on the front foot. That wasn't good. Things came from that campaign, but there was a plan in place, and it was clearly already in action. He was clearly confident about it and said, "Be very excited." And so I think it's all very positive. It's responsive. I think we're still self-sustaining, but we're just willing to dip in and take risks because Josh has much more of a feeling for where we're at in our footballing business than Stan ever could have historically.
Yeah. Look, I think correlation does not equal causation, but that doesn't mean correlation is irrelevant. I think the fact that Stan now owns the club outright and that, Red and White are gone, Red and White Holdings, Usmanov, and David Ornstein referenced this on the Arscast as well, which you should listen to because it was an excellent interview. I think there's a willingness to put more focus and resources behind Arsenal now at KSE because all the benefits inure to them and not to a hostile partner. And I think there was sort of a prisoner's dilemma at Arsenal before because anything that Stan did to enhance Arsenal enhanced his rival as well, who he was trying to buy out and remove. So it is a really difficult thing. How do you keep a club going forward without pushing it forward too far such that you make it impossible to remove your rival and increase what you're going to have to pay to buy them out? So you think about it. Let's say you and I own a house together, God forbid, and that house is worth £100,000. And I want to buy your share of the house. Am I going to put in new hardwood floors and marble countertops and make it beautiful so that now it's worth £200,000 and I have to pay you more to get rid of you? No, I'm going to try to, I don't want the house to fall apart, but I do want to, try to keep it ticking over right where it was until the time I can buy you out, and then I'm going to make it look nicer and enhance my investment. So maybe that change has been valuable. I think we can move on from this conversation because we are a day away from a very, very big game, and I think that is where the majority of the interest is. So, Clive, let's talk Liverpool. This was an unpleasant trip for us last season and really one of the more sobering moments. I mean, I guess you could say some of the disappointing home performances were the most sobering, but one of the more sobering moments last season, the 5-1 loss at Anfield, we really had our comedy defending on display. This game comes early for us. It's unclear whether Pepe will be ready to start. Interesting quote from Hector Bellerin given to the website today. He said, Dani Ceballos is one of the best players he's ever seen in his career, which I think is huge praise. So let's start with this. Who for you are the key Arsenal players who have to start and have big games if we are going to be competitive in this game tomorrow?
But when you're playing teams like Liverpool, Man City, I don't think you can narrow it down to one or two, mate. You need all 11. You really do. And
Well, so who are the 11 players you feel you need to have a good game for?
Well, I've stayed away from a lot of previews this week because I wanted to just talk from what I feel and from watching Liverpool's games and watching the Super Cup and just watching Arsenal. And I think there's a level of optimism that obviously everyone's feeling, and I hope that at the end of this game that will still be there, and I expect it to be. That doesn't mean that we'll win. I just hope that we're going to show people our Sunday, our Saturday best as such, our Sunday best, by just performing with a level of attitude and belonging. I felt in some of these games we've been a little bit humble, been like a little puppy dog, snapping at people's ankles, trying to get a bit of attention. When we're at home, we feel much more confident, but away from home against top 6 teams, we have to remind ourselves we've not won for a long, long time, right? So I'm hoping we're going to go with a level of personality, right? So for me, that's really key. But also, I think I have a hesitation and I have a positive. The hesitation for me is I think Liverpool have a bundle full of confidence, and I think they're a touch more powerful than us. And I think that could come out in the game. And so I think it's how we evade that power. I think they're just 2 or 3 years more mature in certain areas of the pitch. And I think that power and weight we could find quite challenging. And so if you're asking me the players that are going to have to go well, I think it's the 2 centre-halves. And I think it's Lacazette, actually. Some of our more powerful, athletic players are going to have to be at their best. Because I think we have a number of good technicians, but we're quite light. We're quite light on the ball. Tobias is quite light. Guendouzi can be seen to be quite light. Willock is light. We got some... Pepe hasn't got his power base yet if he starts. So I think we could, despite our speed and newfound agility and multi-positional problem solvers in centre midfield, depending on what we pick, I just worry about that. On the flip side to this, I do think we have a lot more technical confidence and security than we've had for a long, long time. And I think if we can impart that security on them, I think we could cause some problems. There are gaps in their midfield. They've been running forward so long, for so many months, when they were forced to run backwards versus Chelsea and against Norwich, particularly on the right-hand side of their defence. We saw something that we haven't seen for a while. Vulnerabilities closer to their goal, leading to their box, crossing from the left-hand side, just driving in that centre-back, right-hand side partnership. And I've got a feeling they'll go with Matip and Joe Gomez for tomorrow, because I just think they recognise it too. And they're not going to disrespect Aubameyang, who's going to be in that slot. They're not going to disrespect Lacazette, who's going to be holding Van Dijk, hopefully, to a position where he can't go over and cover all the mess.
So you think Alexander-Arnold won't start?
I don't think he'll start. I think in some of the more top games, I think he stays out, and I think he could stay out this game. And I think Matip has done well. I think Joe Gomez is more of a defensive right back. And if you're saying, we're playing Arsenal, where do you want to go? Where do you want to stop them? You want to stop them in the right back area, don't you? That's the area that we go into the most. So I think if I was Klopp, I would go with that lineup. And I think that could be interesting for us. That's a sign of respect. And if they go with Alexander-Arnold, well, bring it on, right? Because he's a very, very good footballer, and I'm sure one day he'll end up in midfield. But going backwards in that corner, I think he's got real issues, and he's really vacating it. And I think with our newfound 60-yard passing centre back, I think we got a chance to really get in there and really pick on those areas, and that's what gives me a little bit of hope.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Paul. I mean, I think what's so ironic about this game is you talk about two teams that are strong and weak in the same way, in that the idea of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Mohamed Salah attacking our left defensive flank terrifies me. mean, Nacho Monreal being protected by Aubameyang. I mean, Ainsley Maitland-Niles being protected potentially by Pepe. You know, with Sadio Mane over there, right? I don't, you know, and Andy Robertson. Like, I don't love either of those ideas. But at the same point, if Robertson and Alexander-Arnold are pushing way up the pitch, and they have two not particularly defensive attacking wide forwards, what does that mean for Pepe and Aubameyang in terms of finding pockets of space? And, you know, as Clive referenced, potentially having David Luiz get on the ball and ping long balls over the top. They have been playing a higher line this season. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, Giant Gunner posted some really cool data viz in the stats section of our Discord chat. And one thing that I looked at is Liverpool have faced almost no pressure in midfield. And I'm just wondering, do we have the horses in midfield to pressure them, try to play in transition and get into those channels between the center backs and the fullbacks, because those fullbacks instinctively push up. So for you, are you more scared of defending the wings or more excited about attacking them down the wings?
A bit of both. I think the key to us, I can live with us playing 3 centre backs or 2 centre backs as long as we have a 3-man midfield with Ceballos in there. And
Ceballos.
I have thoughts on who. Yeah. Oh yeah, Ceballos. And I have thoughts on who the other two lads should be, but I think that's the key piece for me, that we have a 3-man midfield, because it is the one area. I saw a pundit's combined 11, and the reaction from Liverpool fans was hilarious, because we had 2 of the 3 midfielders, and they were Ceballos and Willock, and the meltdown over, you know, this player they didn't know, who was 20 years old, making the 3-man midfield. Imagine if the guy had done the right thing and actually put Guendouzi in there as the 3rd-man midfield, the meltdown from the Liverpool fans over this thing. But I think if we can we'll match up really well in midfield. Now, they tend to move quickly through or over midfield, so it doesn't swing the game your way, but it's an area in which we could take some level of control, and that also gives us some level of security over our defense, however we're structured there. So I think we got to keep it compact, and you can do that with the 3-man midfield. I think it's very hard for our team to keep anything compact in transition if we have a 2-man midfield, and you know, if that 3rd midfielder or whatever it is more like Nelson on the left or Ozil floating around. I don't see Ozil starting. You know, the way Ceballos drops deep and sits with and in that 3-man midfield makes all the difference for transitions in both directions and giving us protection, holding onto the ball. So it'll be interesting when the team sheet comes out tomorrow. I'm sure there's going to be surprises. I'd like us to match up as 4-3-3 against them, but I don't think it. I think a 3-man midfield or a 3-man defense at centre back with Luis in the middle also has some logic to it. With our wing backs getting forward, I think either way we probably lose no matter what we do, but I still fancy our chances of nicking something here if we keep it close and bring Pepe on in the second half. But I think the key is that we have an area of strength, and that's the midfield, which they tend to bypass. And with that high line they've been playing, maybe they'll dial that back a little bit for this game. And with maybe a slightly nervy keeper, Adrian, behind that, I mean, there's definitely the target, and if we sit back a little bit, keep it compact, and free up Aubameyang to run at them and their high line. When you look at last season's game, it was 5-1. There were 2 stupid penalties in there. Now, you can't lawyer your way out of the result, but it probably should have been a 3-1 result. And even in that, Aubameyang skied a ball from 6 inches out.
We got outplayed badly in that game.
We did, but you don't do the really stupid stuff. And, you know, instead of it being a 5-1, that could have been an interesting game. I can't lawyer us into winning it or not losing it, but it should never have been 5-1. And I don't see why, if we don't keep this one a little bit more compact, we aren't right in it. I still think we'll probably lose by a goal, maybe two. But we could nick it, and we could have a really interesting second half if we've kept it tight, because these guys could get a little nervous where they're at in the season. So,
Clive, you want to come in?
Yeah. I think also we all picture systems in our mind. So, and we've all debated even on last week's podcast. Funny enough, I did listen to a Liverpool journalist this week, and he said when Tottenham went to Anfield, I think they played a 3 in the first half and got absolutely blitzed at the back. And second half they went to a 4-2, and I think they nearly got a point out of it. So and they were totally in charge. I do feel a 3 in midfield or potentially a diamond in midfield would be really useful, and I tell you why. I think we've got to close that space. We can't give them the sides. If you go there with a 3, they're just going to run you down the sides and stretch out Monreal, stretch out Socrates into one-on-one isolated tackles. Those sort of tackles get you a yellow card within the first 10 minutes because you're one-on-one in wide spaces, and that's how you get a card. So you've got to take away the easy ping into that corner and into both corners. So I would definitely go the 4. I definitely want a 3 in midfield, and whether you go 4-3-3 or 4 diamond with one behind, the 2 up, I don't really mind. But I do think it's a game of stopping waves of attack. That's the key of Liverpool. They get on a wave, and they go 1, they go 2, they go 3 attacks, score. Do you see what I mean? And you've got to repel the first wave, regain, retain, hold, play. Make them separate, make them creep backwards. You're absolutely right. They are playing a higher line this year, so you've got to make them creep. I think we have the option to make them creep backwards by going a little bit longer early and making the pitch a little bit bigger for our more agility. I strongly think it'd be great to have 4 in. I don't mind who he is. We can, easy to name, have 4 in the middle there and say we're going to control this area in the first half, and then be more expansive once we've got a level of confidence in the second half. I do think it's important we do that. Don't give them anything. Match them with, you could easily see a Xhaka, Guendouzi, a Willock, and Ceballos, right? You can see that as a 4, and that's got a lot. That's got a lot of things in there. That's got experience. That's got personality, that's got legs, and that's got agility and intelligence to connect and create a reverse foul for people under pressure in possession. And then you have your 2 forwards, and we don't need to tell them how to play. We've got a player to come on when you take off your 4th midfielder in the second half and be more expansive with 3 forwards. So I think that's how I would approach the game. I think if in these top 6 games, you sort of take them in like 10-minute chunks. And I don't mean to be negative when I say a diamond, but I'm just saying, no, we've got great midfielders. Let's play them. Let's keep our superstar forward, winger, Strutt Merchant on the bench. Let's run out a Willock or run out some in the first half, and then say, okay, now we're going to play you. We're going to play you in a 4-3-3, and now you're going to have to watch us play. And that's how I would approach it. And I think it's very important we do that to stop the waves, because we've been blown off of their pitch historically with goals in real small spaces. And I think that's what we've got to start. And Liverpool expect to do that. They expect to do it again. I think they're going to be surprised by running power. We've got a little bit more experience, a little bit more better decision at the back. And we've definitely got a forward, which is the match of anything they have. I think it's going to be, I'll tell you what, I'm getting excited more I talk about it. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, you know what I could see that I would really like would be a 4-1-3-2. And what I mean by that is, so the 4 across the back, you know who they are. The 3 in midfield would be Ceballos, Guendouzi, and Willock, okay? But behind them, I'd put Torreira in, and I'd say you just follow Firmino around. Just follow him around the pitch. Wherever he goes, you go. Don't let him drop into those pockets of space. Don't let him pop up between the thirds, between the lines, and distribute. You just follow Firmino around. And then up front, Lacazette and Aubameyang, and let them kind of split a little bit wider and attack in from the channels, or even Pepe and Aubameyang and do that. And let the midfield 3 try to control possession, pressure Liverpool's midfield, don't give them any space to distribute, and hope that by doing that, you can choke off the service to Salah and Mane. Because I really do believe that once Salah and Mane get on the ball, they're going to destroy us. I don't think we have a defender who can stay with either of them. Maitland-Niles definitely can't stay with Sadio Mane. Nacho definitely can't stay with Salah. and I don't know if I trust the center backs to be able to give the help. So denying them the ball by cutting off service to Firmino, denying them the ball by pressing in midfield with numbers and trying to counter, I think that could work. I mean, Paul, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about how we can use our personnel to keep the ball out of the feet, away from the feet, the killer feet of their two wide forwards?
Look, I definitely think 3 centre backs is the logical way to stifle them.
All right, can I stop you just for a second? So when we've played the back 3, that's when I think we've been the absolutely most vulnerable in wide spaces. We got killed in the wide spaces when we played the back 3. That's how teams attacked us, behind the wingbacks. You really think that the back 3 gives us solidity there, especially because you're bringing in extra defenders who are not equipped to handle Salah or Mane in terms of agility or movement?
Well, if we've got 3 at the back, depending on what stage of the game you may in fact have 5 at the back to cut off those wide spaces. I don't think even when we play a 4 at the back, our 2 full-backs, we really close down those crosses. And it never seems to have been a feature of Emery at Arsenal that the rush is to get Maitland-Niles or Nacho out to match up against their wing-backs or full-backs coming forward to put in crosses to close them down. And it's just not a feature of our game. Emery's tendency is much more to keep it compact, whatever that lineup at the back is. So if you're worried about Firmino weaving his patterns and creating havoc, 3 at the back with Luis in the middle, who's not the most positionally disciplined player, but loves a combative tussle. And then we get the ball with 3 centre backs. Luis is free to take a position that can long ball it over the top to Aubameyang. There's a lot to be said for it in either direction. Now, personally, I still would like us to back up with kind of match them with 4-3-3. But to your scenario, if we've 3 centre backs and 3 midfielders, which we haven't done with them before, and we haven't generally done with 3 at the back, if we have Ceballos sitting quite deep among our midfielders, that's a different proposition to what you're comparing us to, because normally we haven't had that third midfielder. And I think when you think of Firmino running down the middle in the 5-1 last season between Socrates and Mustafi, and the gap a mile wide, and our midfielders scrambling after him. I think Chak is chasing him back and doing okay, but he's starting from behind. Instead of having that situation, you've actually got 3 centre backs. You got Luis in the middle, right down the middle where he ran, and you had 3 midfielders and therefore more coverage in front of that. So it's a whole different proposition. And I think it was Tim who said he could see us transitioning from 3 at the back to 2 centre backs for example, in the second half when we wanted to be more aggressive rather than the other way around. That was an interesting thought. I would have seen us doing what we did against Burnley, where maybe to hold on, we put in that third centre back later on in the game. But his thought was we start with 3 centre backs and then get more aggressive in the second half, which is an interesting twist. Yeah. Personally, I still tilt towards 4-3-3 because I'm not sure we need to be that scared of this Liverpool quite yet. But I still think that's not to say we go at them in the first half. I think you still keep it very compact, and where you've upgraded your security is by having 3 proper CMs with Ceballos right in the mix for that first half to make sure we got it locked down. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Liverpool are sort of in a transition in the sense that, and they did this last season too, they are not the gegenpressing, counter-pressing maniacs that Klopp is known for. They were not last season, and they are definitely not so far this season. In the Super Cup against Chelsea in the first half, they pressed basically not at all. In the second half, when they needed to get back in the game, they started the second half pressing, and Chelsea got blown off the pitch for about 20 minutes. They couldn't live with it. I don't think Liverpool right now want to come out of the gate pressing aggressively. That's not their style. I think Klopp has transitioned them to a different way of playing, and so I think
they're a more possession team now.
They're a more possession team. They're playing a slightly higher line. But here's what's interesting to me. Clive, when you look at the big games last season where we were pretty good, I don't know if we played a back 3 in any of them. I'm struggling to think. I know some of our best performances, I guess we used it against Spurs at home in the game that we won.
Yep.
First half.
Yeah. We played back four a lot against the big sides. And what I noticed that we did, and this was true early in the season, if you remember, against City and Chelsea, right when Emery arrived, we played back four, but really narrow. And we played a box in midfield, and we kept central spaces closed off. It seems like what Emery wants to do against the big teams is really muck up the center of the pitch and force them out wide and force them to try to find a way through a really tight column of players through the middle of the pitch. Now, unfortunately, Liverpool are a team that can probably find a way to live with that. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, look, the way people look at the back three is just not correct. Right? So when you're playing a back three, what you're literally doing is removing a defender. You're not adding anything. You're taking one out. And so the players see it as the most attacking formation because you're removing a defender and you're pushing everything up. And you're saying, we're going to stay here and we're going to defend with three. Right. So and that means we push up in wide areas and we use it as an aggressive attacking tactic. Right. So or you use it as a game state finisher for a team like Stoke the other day, right? So,
Burnley. I understand why you'd confuse them with Stoke, but Burnley.
Yeah, I did it on purpose, right? So, and so basically, the back four against big teams, you've got to play that way. For me, and I'm a fan of the back three, but against the big teams, you can't give them anything. You can't give them nothing, no green grass to go and see. It's a battle of midfield. So Liverpool's midfield, they're going to have Fabinho, probably Wijnaldum, and probably Henderson as the midfield three. Right. So there's not a lot of agility, creativity. There's a lot of running. There's lots of covering fullbacks, and there's a lot of counter pressing when we have the ball. This is why I think we could surprise them. Because I think we've got better players on the press than we've had for a while. A bit more athletic and a bit harder to read and what they're going to do. So I'm interested by that. And our ability to release from the pressure was really, really good last week against quite a physically fit team that was pressing. Liverpool don't press per se, but what they have improved on massively is what they do when they have the ball. I think they've developed a bit more of a creative attacking force, and they attack into their midfield, out to fullbacks, cross early, take Firmino into midfield, try to get some 1-2s going. They've got more comfortable with having the football. They've got, maybe I think, too comfortable because they're creeping up the pitch and they're full of strut. They know they've got Gomez and Van Dijk and they win all the races. And teams have not brought it up to them through their midfield to start sliding things through. But Chelsea did for a long period in that Super Cup, right? Norwich did, with simple, good passing combinations, got through their midfield and onto their backline. When you're onto their backline, they've become so dependent on Van Dijk. Watching him play reminds me of Vieira's Arsenal. If he was not in our midfield, we didn't have a midfield. And we became so dependent on him to do two jobs. And Van Dijk is doing Robinson's job. That's why he's so high up the pitch all the time. And if he's playing with a centre-half that's not on his game, he has to do his job. And he's also got to keep his eye on the goalkeeper at the moment. I think there's a potential weakness there because they're over-reliance and dependence on Van Dijk. And I think we can really do something against him because I think he's becoming a little bit... Roy the Rovers in his defending. He's just now, I'm back here. Don't worry, lads. But with good combination of smart movement, you can beat that. And I've seen him being moved around by Timo Pukki. He's been moved around, right? And I think we've got a chance, but we've got to keep the midfield compact. Don't give them the sides early on, and really progress. I think we could cause some nerves and some issues.
Yeah, well, let's do this then. Let's start to talk about what we think is going to happen. And Paul, I want to ask you a question because that's how this format works. If I said you had to bet £100,000 on the starting lineup, and I gave you the option to tell me how many of the players you think you could get right with £100,000 on the lineup, out of the 11, how many do you think you could pick correctly with £100,000 riding on it? 5, 4, 7? Realistically,
8.
like You think you could get 8 nailed-on players that you're sure will start tomorrow?
Maybe 7.
All right. Who are your 7 nailed-on definitely starting?
All right. So I got Socrates, outfield players, or
No. It's the
Leno?
11. Leno. Yeah, you get Leno. There you go. If Martinez starts,
Socrates,
I'm going to die laughing.
Luis, yeah, Ainsley, Maitland-Niles, Nacho.
Okay. That's
okay.
5.
Okay, Ceballos.
You're that confident Ceballos will start, huh?
Well,
I am.
yeah, I think so. Ceballos, Lacazette, and
Really?
Aubameyang. Yeah.
The
How am I
only
doing?
players I'm sure will start are the 4 defenders you named, the goalkeeper, and Aubameyang. There is not another player I am sure will start in the entire lineup. So go ahead for me. Pick the rest of them. How's he going to set us out? You don't have to say necessarily how the formation will look. Who are the 11 going to be?
I think Xhaka's 50. I think Guendouzi probably starts. And so if Xhaka ain't playing, I think it's either Torreira or Willock, and I think that's about 50-50. So my guess would be the midfield is going to be Guendouzi, Ceballos, and probably Torreira, but I prefer Willock because I think he will just match up well against them in midfield. The front 3, I still think he's going to start with Mkhitaryan, Lacazette, and Aubameyang. And Mkhitaryan might be that 4th midfielder that Clive's been talking about. And I think Maitland-Niles and Nacho at full back, assuming a 4 at the back. So that's my midfield 3. The midfield 3: Ceballos, Guendouzi, and probably Xhaka is the most likely. But I'm going with Torreira / Willock, one or the other.
I will say this. I think the reason Pepe won't start ultimately is because I think Aubameyang and Pepe both in the front line is too little defensive intensity off the ball. I think Pepe really has to show that he can up his defensive intensity before Emery will feel confident starting him in big games. Now, you could say that's a dumb thing to think about an attacking player, but I think that Emery thinks it. And I certainly think you can't go to Anfield with any passengers off the ball. Lacazette is a worker off the ball. And so I think that's why he's in line to start. Personally, I would go the front line of Aubameyang, Mkhitaryan, and Pepe. But I don't think Emery will do that because I think he will want Lacazette's slightly better control of possession, although I think that's overstated, but definitely his off-the-ball intensity.
But isn't it a jump to think that Pepe is definitely ready? Because that's not the vibe I'm getting from Emery. He's kind of.
I think he's definitely ready. I don't think Emery thinks he's ready.
Yeah, but that's kind of an Elliot thing, isn't it? We always have this. You're impatient that the new guy doesn't start, and managers are a bit more cautious.
I'm not mad about it. Wait, let me be clear.
Yeah.
I totally could understand feeling this game comes too soon for Pepe. What I'm saying is I want to attack the channels. I want to attack the spaces between the fullback and the center back. And I think that Pepe is the better player for that. I don't think Lacazette has looked great yet this season. I think he's still a little rusty. He didn't have much of a preseason. And I realize this is coming right after a game where he scored a crucial goal with individual brilliance. But other than that, was not in the game at all. I think that Lacazette...
Realistically, I'd start him. I'm just guessing he's not ready in one form or the other.
Paul, totally understandable. I think there are good reasons not to start him. I think it's interesting that Emery made the comment in his pre-match presser. He said, I think Pepe is ready for more minutes than he played last weekend, but last weekend he played 45. So what's he going to give him? An hour? No, he's not going to sub him on after 30 minutes. So if he really means that he's ready for more minutes on Saturday, he's starting, but I don't think he will. I agree with you. Look, I am saying I think Lacazette and Aubameyang will both start. When push comes to shove, I think Emery likes to have them both out there because he also knows, look, I'm right. Lacazette didn't play well in the other game, but he scored a goal. Aubameyang, I don't know if he played brilliantly, but he scored a goal. And the fact of the matter is, when you have two strikers who can not play well and both score a goal, you're going to win a lot of games. So there's nothing wrong with that. Clive, I want you to pick an 11, not a 14, not a I could see this 17 people playing. Pick an 11, and let's see how close we can get.
Okay, so Leno, right to left, Maitland-Niles, Socrates, Luis Monreal. It'll be Xhaka, Guendouzi, Ceballos. It'll be Aubameyang, Pepe, and Lacazette. That's the team.
Wow.
Pick.
Okay.
I think
Wow.
it's August, right? It's August. Let's not piss about. It's August. We're going to go there, and we have to find out about what we've got. But why not try to find out? The world won't end, whatever happens. But we may learn something that will be invaluable for the rest of the season, right? We'll learn about where Xhaka is, where he is. Where I think he's the leader of the team. We see his failings, but I think going to that cauldron, we need somebody like that. Guendouzi is another player that doesn't lack gumption. He will want the ball at all times, and so will Ceballos. That's 3 ball-hungry players in there. What they do on it, how they move it quickly, their job is really simple with that front 3. What I like about the front 3 is 2 of them will come short, and they'll roll into the centre of midfield. And I think that'll be interesting because particularly from the right-hand channel, I think playing Pepe is the masterstroke because what that's going to do, that's going to make Robertson think, and it's going to make Van Dijk think. That kid's got the ability to hold up a train. Seriously, he can just stand there, hold, and the game stops, and then he starts it when he's ready. I think that's going to make Van Dijk nervous. That's going to give space for Aubameyang. There is no prizes in waiting to find out by talking about Mkhitaryan and talking about Torreira, who's not ready. Right? These players will play in time, but let's find out in August what we've got. We might learn something that will help us for the Spurs home game the week after, but we won't die wondering by playing that team. And I don't see an issue with it. We got people at the base, we got a floating connector in midfield, and we got 3 forwards. And I do think Pepe takes up good defensive positions. By that, he doesn't press the ball. Maybe Elliot, you probably know better than me. But what he does do, okay, what he does do, he seems to be available for the pass. And there's a saying I always have: make sure they can see your boots in the crowd. If you're a defender to the midfielders, I say, make sure they can see your boots. Get on the line, they can see your boots, and that means you can help so much on getting on the counter press by being really available at the right time and then holding it and allowing us to get out. I think Pepe does that. I think Aubameyang doesn't do that as well, but he does it with pure hard work. He does really help on his side. But I think if you're a Liverpool team now, and they do play Alexander-Arnold, and they do play their normal team, then they have to be wary of our 2 forwards, surely. They have to be. And so you're going to make a plan for those 2. You can't just leave them 2-on-2. I think we'll take them. Right? So I think the usage of those front 3 will be important. And I do think how Lacazette comes back into midfield and really works back into there to catch them and sneak up on them and surprise them, and we spring from there would be important. So I see that as the team, no hesitation, and I hope we pick it.
Yeah, I got to tell you something. You've said something that really resonates with me, which is this is free money in a sense. Look, I don't think Liverpool are some all-conquering Goliath that we can't play with, but I do think that these are free points in the sense that if you get no points at Anfield, it doesn't derail your season. So yeah, go at them with Lacazette, Aubameyang, and Pepe and see how that front 3 looks. And put Torreira, Guendouzi, and Ceballos, or Willock, Guendouzi, and Ceballos in midfield, and then put the 4 across the back that we can pick right now. Of course, we don't have Tierney or Bellerin yet, and see how it goes and learn some things about how that lineup, that mobile, agile midfield, that dynamic attacking front 3 with our 3 arguably best attacking players all together works, and come away with, if not the points, some insight. Something that Emery can use as a data point to build over the season and understand, what worked, what didn't work. Because, look, I think short of getting embarrassed, nothing that happens on Saturday derails our season. I remember last season we started with City and Chelsea, and we lost both games. And I remember very clearly after those 2 games, I actually felt more upbeat after those 2 games than I think I did after Project 22, because I saw some really good signs of the type of football we wanted to play and the things we were working on. And then, unfortunately, we kind of moved away from them. So I think you can lose on Saturday.
Losing this game, sorry, mate, I was saying losing a game running scared versus losing a game with no inferiority complex and trying to win it. I know which one I prefer. I think it's time we stop walking into these grounds with an inferiority complex. We have the players. We've invested in the players. They're in form. Play them.
Trust him. Yeah,
It's not a problem.
I totally agree. And look, that's not to say that you shouldn't build a coherent game plan for the opposition you're playing. The one thing we were always critical of Arsene about is Arsene threw his best players out there, devil be damned, play our way, and then get hammered because our way didn't work. And I don't think anyone wants to go back to that necessarily, but yeah, I think you can learn a lot from doing it that way. Paul, before we go into score predictions, I'll give you some feedback here because in the chat you have typed very angrily that you disagree with us. So why do you disagree with us?
Yeah, I got to disagree. There is something at play here. It's not free money. If Pepe gets a setback in terms of his confidence, that's going to cause and slow down and impact his introduction and impact on our 38-game season. So while you can say...
Can I push back on that? How would his confidence be knocked in any way by what happens tomorrow?
Well... How about he's shit?
So what? So he's shit at Liverpool. A lot of people. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if he was a defender, hang on, just hear me out.
The guy stepped into a swimming pool wearing his socks and a shirt, right? He barely knows which way is up at the moment. He's learning his way around the city. I mean, if you were concerned in the chat. He didn't come to the Premier League
to sit on the bench at Anfield either. These kids want to play at these big stadiums. That's why they come to the league in the first. Like, if he was a defender, Paul, I'd say I agree because if we ship 5 goals and it's his first game and he feels guilty of that, sure. But he's a forward. Like, is he really going to have anything happen to him in this game that derails his season?
Yeah, and not his season, but. You could lose several weeks of confidence and introduction. Look, why not just bring him on in the second half? It's not like we're not going to need the goals, where he runs after tired legs, where he's had some success. I mean, it's one thing to say he can play more than 45 minutes. That's not the same as he's ready to play 90 minutes. He's ready to start. They're going to be ready for us from the get-go. Don't make our problems Pepe's problems. He's just on a different introduction path. And you see manager after manager bringing in players. This guy speaks French. That's it. He doesn't know London. He doesn't know how to step into a swimming pool. He's a kid. And if you don't think that going out there in front of 60,000 Liverpool fans and having a stinker and getting yanked off at halftime wouldn't affect your confidence when all you've ever played for is Lille before that, of course it could have an impact. So
it's interesting
there is a risk.
It's interesting how you perceive the player because
he's a grown man. He's in his prime.
He's
23 years old. He's
24 years old. He's in his prime. We bought him for £70 million.
But shall I tell you where he's not a kid? It's when the ball's at his feet. This is what I took.
Space, though, Clive.
This is what I took from the game last week. He absolutely plays like a matador. He's got absolute, total confidence on the football. My only issue is I hope we get the ball to him enough, right? Because his technical ability in one-on-one situations to manipulate and move the ball, protect its safe side, keep the ball moving. I think I'm more confident of that than I am in front of goal at the moment because I've just not seen it. Do you know what I mean? He had a weak shot.
He's had a weak passes though too.
His passes are fine.
He's a lot. He hasn't settled in, Clive. He just hasn't.
Oh, but I'm not saying he has settled in, Paul. I'm saying to you.
Neither has Xhaka, by that measure.
Yeah. No. I'm just saying. The guy has got technical confidence that I think is repeatable wherever it is. He just has that thing about how he receives the ball and how he moves it. So I think this is the perfect place to play him. You know, the perfect place where
but even by that, Clive, wouldn't perfect be the start of the second half when they're getting a bit more tired? Isn't that
Paul,
more
perfect? I wouldn't cry myself to sleep over that. I got asked a question about how I'd start, and I'd say this is what I would do, right? But if he came on second half, and say Nelson started, that wouldn't be the end of the world. I'd much prefer that than going to a back three and showing inferiority that we're trying to stop you. I would like to say I want to, so Nelson brings a lot of the same things, a lot more work rate in the first half. I'm sick of going to Anfield and the game being over at half time. So that wouldn't be the end of the world for me, Paul. Absolutely. If he came on at half time or he came after an hour, it doesn't matter. But what I'm trying to say to you and everybody is that why be inferior? We all feel positive. We're playing Liverpool. So what? right? So what? It's August, right? So what? We're playing them, and they're talking about us. So everyone can see there's a better construct to our centre midfield. We've got a much more experienced defender in the back line. Monreal he's got a little bit of the youth juice at the moment at left back. He's not having to run into corners at left centre half. He's in his hole and he's doing fine, right? He's got Aubameyang ahead of him, and he's just underlapping him. And he's just been steady, and that's great. Maitland-Niles has improved, and he has got the speed to stay, but the only one in the league's got the speed to stay with Mane. We know he can knock off at times. Set our back four up, and we got midfield personality, and I don't mind what we do up, but I definitely think Aubameyang and Lacazette should definitely start the game. And then we had the third one, Paul, absolutely, second half, we'll start the game. But let's not play with kid gloves here. We spent £72 million on this guy, and he is a very, very good player. I guarantee you, if Liverpool saw Nelson on the team sheet, they'd be a lot more pleased than if they saw Pepe on the team sheet. Right?
And I want to say something too. Go ahead. Hang on just a second.
Klopp is no fool, so I don't think if you agree with me that Pepe can have an even more perfect introduction in the second half than the first half. Klopp knows that too. He might look at Klopp and think at Pepe and say, that guy's still working out to cover his fullback, how to pass in the midfield. He may not be that scared of Pepe being introduced in the first half. And it's not a sign of weakness to say, Pepe's coming up to speed, we'll play him in the second half. We're going to play Mkhitaryan or Nelson on the other side because they're played in and they know how we play.
Paul, what you're saying there, Paul, that's football. Yeah, and you've made a really valid point. What you said originally was it could crush his confidence, and I don't agree with that. I think he's got a level of technical confidence.
Well, I said he could set him back. Yeah,
and I think don't let's not worry about that because I think the boy can play. I don't think confidence is an issue.
I think he can play.
From a footballistically point of view,
he'll come in faster in the second half than the first half, and confidence is significant to a player like this.
I mean, Marcus Rashford announced himself to the football world by scoring against us. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain had his breakout performance against AC Milan in the Champions League.
Rashford has gone backward based on confidence. He lost the ability to score. These are young players. It's a lot of pressure.
But
you
that
put
can
them in the
happen
right
to any
circumstances.
player.
They thrive.
At the end of the day, when you get paid,
anybody, so put them in good circumstances.
Mustafi's a 30-year-old player. He lost his
favor.
confidence. Mustafi's a 30-year-old player who lost his confidence and can't play anymore. Like, that can happen at any point in your career. I guess what I'm saying is,
load the dice in his favor.
If he's a good enough player to be a game winner at Anfield, start him at Anfield. If you don't think he's ready, if the coach doesn't believe he's ready, genuinely doesn't believe he's ready, either his fitness isn't ready or tactically he's not ready, he shouldn't start. I totally agree with that. I think the idea of not starting him purely because it's a high-pressure situation and failure could set him back is a bad reason. If he's tactically not ready, if he's physically not ready, Paul, I totally agree with you. Don't start a player who is not integrated enough to start. If the reason you're not starting him is it's a hard game and emotionally it could be too much for him, I think that's a bad reason. That's just a slight disagreement philosophically. But, a lot of these players lose their confidence late in their career. A lot of these players lose their confidence middle of their career. That can happen to anyone. I think most big players also want to play big games. I think if you asked Pepe, does he want to be out there to start a game at Anfield? That's one of the reasons he came to the Premier League. To go out there and be on the Anfield pitch.
You run into this every time, though. You're doing it again. You said you wouldn't. Xhaka came in. He didn't get played for a little while. We wanted to introduce him. Torreira came in. We didn't really play him for a while. We wanted to introduce him. They got to find their feet, and they got to find their confidence, and they got to find the synchronicities.
I don't have a problem with that.
You don't drop them in the middle of Anfield minute 1 when you can drop them in at 45 minutes and they've got some space.
If he is physically fit enough and tactically prepared enough to start, he should start. I don't think his psychological well-being should be a factor.
Managers do this time and time again at Arsenal.
Yeah, and they get it wrong most of the time. So we'll see what happens. But let's do this. Let's do a score prediction. Clive, what do you think?
I think it could be, and by saying this, it means we're going to lose. I say it could be a 2-2 draw, but I actually think we can win the game 2-1.
Okay. I would take that, I guess. Paul, what about you?
I'm thinking a 2-1 or 3-1. I'm going to go with 2-1.
To who?
We lose.
Oh, okay. Yeah, look.
I think it'll be good performance, and we could tie it, but I'm going with the 2-1 loss.
Yeah, I'm going to go 3-1 loss. I think we will play well, but I think that our back line is still not strong enough to resist what they have up front. So I think we'll play. It could be one of those typical games. You know what I mean, guys? The ones where you're like, oh man, that was a harsh result on us because we were playing really well. But at the end of the day, defensive errors or not quite being good enough in defense against the really phenomenal front line they have could make the difference. I think. I think we will play well and lose because we're just not quite defensively as solid as we need to be. And we know that. And that's going to be an issue throughout the season that we have to work on. We'll only get better.
I think playing well will be a win because we haven't played well there for a long time.
Okay.
I think playing well is so important to going into the Spurs game. I think that's the key thing, to let everyone know that we're back, because we all feel it secretly, but we all concerned this is the one place we get blown off the park normally. So what do? We go into our shell, or do we go to play? And I hope we go to play. And then let's find out where we are. Let's find out where we are in August. Home game versus Spurs takes care of itself, right? Don't worry about that. That'll be absolutely fine. But we have a chance to find out where we are. And notwithstanding, Paul makes some great points about the second half. Like I say, I wouldn't cry myself to sleep. But I hope we play a shape as it says, yeah, we're here. This is what we are now, and we've got players that want the ball in midfield, and we're going to take you. And that's why that'll be my team talk. Let's not piss about anymore. It's time. We've been in this stagnant position for so many years, scared of our own shadow. I've had enough of it. We got good players. Let's play. Let's go and take them.
One thing to bear in mind, by the way, they don't have Allison back there. They have Adrian. Adrian's distribution is not great, and I don't think he has a lot of confidence. So maybe you want to try to test him a little bit more. I think get him in the game early, see if he's up for it, because that's a potential weakness for them that they didn't used to have. Allison could get the ball at his feet, hit the ball long, and hit Salah in stride running in behind your back line. I don't think Adrian can do that. Press him, get him in the game, and see if you can get him to make an error. Paul, just real quick, we didn't mention him at all, but I think we should at least touch on it. You think Ozil could play any part in this?
No.
Not ready yet.
Yeah.
Based on reports, we don't know though, do we? So
no, we don't. And I'm kind of hoping. I haven't written Xhaka off for this season in terms of his contribution. I think he can be still a significant player for us, a big player for us, especially if we move to Ceballos in there, so we got that midfield three. But the manager did say that only by Friday would he give the green light to Xhaka or Ozil. So I'm kind of hoping that he keeps Ozil and Xhaka on the back burner for this game on the basis that they were kind of touch and go. And mentally they may not quite be prepared, or the rest of the team may not be prepared for them. So that's kind of why my hope that we'll stick with the same three midfielders we had for the last game, which would kind of preclude Xhaka or Ozil.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Paul's point about Pepe and confidence. Funny enough,
I feel similarly
about Willock, and I might be being unfair, right? But I want to protect him. Maybe he comes on late. Do you see what I mean? So if you sense something, if you sense that, Paul, you're well within your rights, right, to say it. But I sense it about Willock. I think, you know what? You don't need to play here. You can maybe come in when the situation suits you. But then I think, well, hold on a minute. He came on in the Europa League final and ripped it. So sometimes we get overprotective. And when it comes down to what's really refreshing about last week's game was we had such mobility and verve and dynamism, and reverting back to old plodders because they give us comfort maybe isn't what we should be doing. Although I do think Xhaka will play because that is a sensible thing to do. But if Willock did play with the same midfield as last week, I think that'd be fantastic to see us go for it. I really do.
I was a guest on a Liverpool pod yesterday, and I always think it's interesting what other fans think, and they were talking amongst themselves about how they hope Xhaka will play, not because they don't think he's any good, but because they think he's a vulnerability in our team and someone who can be targeted. And I just think that's interesting to see their perspective, that they thought he was someone that they could target if he starts. But we'll see. Look, guys, it's exciting. It's nerve-wracking. Liverpool is a better team than us. all you have to do is look at where they finished in the table last season, the fact that they won the Champions League and where we were playing last season and the competition we were in. That doesn't mean we can't compete with them. So I would like to see us go out there and compete and measure ourselves. And I don't think we have to measure ourselves by the points we get, because Burnley might go there and get points. That doesn't mean they're as good a team as they are. I'd like to see us measure ourselves against them in our football, and we'll see what happens with the points. And our first good argument of the season. So that was fun, Paul. I always appreciate when we can tangle.
Sorry about that, everybody.
No, it's fun. Look, it's good fun.
It's
a game of opinions. And everyone is entitled to bad ones. So Paul's on Twitter at PositiveMyPets. Thanks, Pos.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name is Asshole Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Leave us a 5-star review. Right now, some things about us in the comments. We'll be back with the post-match podcast with Tim, of course, and Scott will be back along as well. We'll be posting the recording of this in a couple of places, including on Patreon as a podcast and maybe on YouTube. I'll figure out where to put it. Can't really put it into the regular pod feed for reasons that will bore you, but it'll show up somewhere. To everyone who joined us live, I just want to say thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We'll do live YouTube shows as well, but sometimes these audio ones are easier to pop up with and easier for people to listen to. So, big game, up the Arsenal. 3 big points coming. Massive game, including a phenomenal second half debut from Pepe that proves a masterstroke psychologically from Emery. So we'll look forward to that. So, all right, everybody, get excited. Big game coming up this week and our first big game of the season. We'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Liverpool 0.